Hey guys, welcome back. Hope you're having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first story is titled, You Want to Kick Me Out of the House I Paid to Get Into? Enjoy No Utilities. The time was 2004. I was 20 and very inexperienced in life. I had moved to Arizona and rushed into a relationship with a guy, moving in together within 2 to 3 months of meeting. I made the mistake of telling him I had money, a lump sum I had received from my dad's VA back benefits. He was always encouraging me to spend it, and I didn't think anything of it because I loved him. I paid $1,500 to move into our rental, rent, deposit, all utilities. He signed a piece of paper to pay me back half, but never did, and I ended up moving back to Washington and just left it all behind me. After 5 months of living together, he told me he didn't want this kind of commitment. And yes, it was right after I ran out of money. I couldn't afford this house on my own, so I was already looking for an apartment. But after a fight, he told me he wanted me out in 2 days. All right, Mother Ducker, you want me out in 2 days? I went to the electrical company, cable company, and gas company and moved or disconnected all services. I gave no heads up and waited. 2 days later, he called and was calling me an idiot. He had no hot water, no lights, and no gas for his stove. Duck you, Matt. The next story is titled, If We're Deconstructing the Notion of Queuing in Lines. At my local grocery store, some folks have gotten really loose about what is fair for holding places in lines. For instance, last month, a teenager had just 1 gallon of milk and 1 box of cereal in his hands, so I got in line behind him. Within a couple of minutes, his mom and younger sister come over, the sister with her arms full, their mom with a handbasket, easily 5 or more times what the teenager had. But I wasn't in a rush and there were lines all over, so whatever, just context of the kind of thing that I mean. Today, though, my mom went, and when she finished shopping, she got behind someone else with a cart about as full as my mom's. That person told her something about there's also a lady behind her, but there was nobody else nor any groceries left in line, so my mom shrugged it off. Minutes later, a woman on a cell phone, whoa-see, suddenly shows up with a handbasket and gestures in front of my mom. I'm here. Having been forewarned, my mother took it in stride. Found it very odd considering the person with the cart, PWTC, and woman on the cell phone, whoa-see, were not interacting with each other. They didn't seem to know each other. Just the PWC held a spot in line behind them, without groceries, for whoa-see. Mom, likewise, shrugged it off, until the whoa-see walks away again, saying, I'll be back. By this point, a couple with their own handbasket gets in line behind my mom, and someone with just a gallon of milk is given the universal pass by everyone present in the line to skip them all. Only milk checks out, and PWTC is up with my mom after because the whoa-see hasn't returned. Just before my mom could put her groceries on the belt, the whoa-see arrives and declares, I'm back now, to my mom, trying to insert herself between my mom's cart and that of PWTC. If she had returned with more groceries or the same items in her handbasket, my mom didn't tell me. Bothered by this self-importance, my mom told her, no, you're behind everybody, who stood and waited. One time you did this. Maybe you walked away twice. The whoa-see was still on the phone, apparently, so she might not have understood fully, protested momentarily, and my mom reiterated. With that, whoa-see said, oh, okay, you can go first if you want, and moved aside enough for my mom to put her groceries on the belt. Mom intentionally put a space between her groceries and those of PWTC and told the couple who had come up behind her that they could go after PWTC. She didn't give whoa-see time to protest, although she did have to repeat what she told the couple because they spoke Spanish better than English. I'm not sure whether whoa-see was rightfully after my mom then, or if she should have waited behind even more people, but Mom was pleased enough, having let the couple skip in front of her, guaranteeing whoa-see hadn't skipped as many people. The next story is titled, Fire Me? You're all losing your jobs. My 2019 was wild. But with everything finally on the up and up, I feel I can tell this story here. After uni, late 2018, I fell on rough times and was forced to move back to my hometown. I tried to transfer my job to a branch in my area, but failed. Thus, I needed to get a new job. I settled for a 20-hour-a-week job at a bookies, with a second bartending job in the evening. The bookies is the target for my revenge, which was entirely accidental. Involved are the following: Janelle, my manager's manager, Shay, my manager, Jorge, and Gordon, my coworkers, and Kara, a coworker at another store, who was relevant later. Names changed and or redacted. I ended up working behind the counter as a customer service manager, basically a step up from a cashier. It's fancy when you see it on a CV, but there's nothing really to it. I took bets, chatted with customers, helped people with machines, and for the vast majority of my shift, sat around waiting for something to do. I got on well with my coworkers, or so I thought, and had no major issues. It was 20 hours a week, about, one more than minimum wage, with a lot of overtime required of me, and irregular shift patterns. Though I had no issue with the job, beyond how difficult it was to juggle the schedules of both of my jobs, in February of 2019, after working for the company for 6 months, I was invited to a probation hearing. It cannot be emphasized enough that it was a probation hearing in which I would have my performance reviewed and, as informed in training, was entitled to a pay raise at the end of it. I arrived that morning to a disciplinary hearing where, without even a shred of evidence, I was accused of 11 different cash discrepancies dating back to November of 2018, shortly after I'd started, which all amounted to $271.36. All but one of which I'd never heard of before. These had apparently been reported and logged by my manager, Shay, and my coworkers, despite no one saying a word to me at all. Not a whisper in the 5 months this had apparently been occurring. I was told that it was unacceptable. A call was made to HR, and I was terminated on the spot and forced to hand over my keys and to never set foot in the store again. To my protest, I was told the decision could not be appealed, and I would eventually receive written confirmation of my employment's termination in the post. I didn't let myself slump around and feel sorry for myself, so, on the way home, I opened up Indeed and applied for a bunch of jobs, and before I arrived home, had an interview set up for the next week at what is my current place of work. Now, I was furious. Fuming at having gone to what I thought should have been a normal probation meeting and having effectively been called a thief and been banned for life from a place I'd never go to anyway. But somehow my parents were angrier and ordered me to let them know when they got in contact with me again. Almost 2 weeks later, I received an email from the company's HR, which reiterated the accusations and stated again that I was terminated. My mom sat me down in her kitchen and walked me through a letter response that was 2 parts professional and 3 parts scathing, ripping into them about their unprofessional conduct, their ludicrous claims, their lack of evidence, the holes in their story, because there were quite a few, and finally the cherry on the cake, the employment laws they'd broken. Now I didn't want much, just a nice reference. A promise that not a whisper of these accusations would turn up when my new job asked them for a reference, because by then I'd already been offered the job. I then attached the letter to an email to fire back at their HR department. Then I added Janelle's work email, then her boss email, and finally the holding company that owned the brand. 'Cause I wanted to make sure this was seen, a bit of background. The bookies I worked for is a brand that is owned by an international company. Their name, behind the scenes, is slapped on everything, and they pretty much dictate everything we did. I'm not sure if the holding company is the correct term, but I'll stick to that for now. Anyway, I sent this email with a 48-hour window for a response. I received a reply the next day from the same email that my demands were being met. I smirked victoriously and moved on with my life, happy to wash my hands with the entire ordeal. However, I'd set off a chain reaction that I wouldn't know about until 3 months later. 3 months on, I'd settled into my new job, a call center position with double the hours and well over double the pay. I'd gone through training, and was settling into my new position when I saw a new set of trainees settling in near my team. Among them was Gordon, one of my coworkers from the bookies. I was stunned. Gordon had been at the bookies for 6 years when I joined. He was well liked, good at his job, and a favorite of the managers. There was no way he'd been fired. Though I really didn't want to talk to him, as I was of the impression that he, Jorge, and my manager had likely set me up. I did want to know what happened. Luckily, on seeing me in the break room one shift, he sought me out and told me everything. Apparently, my email had been read by higher-ups in the holding company and had caused a lot of scrutiny to fall onto the bookies in our town, of which there were 3 in our area that Janelle was responsible for, 2 in my town and a 3rd in a neighboring one. Someone in HR passed a message down to the area manager, Janelle's boss, claiming they wanted things investigated, and they wanted results yesterday, causing him to drop everything and descend on our little town with the panic and aggression of a man whose superiors were watching his every breath. He went to Janelle, wanting to know why he hadn't been made aware previously that I was apparently stealing money, why I had been given keys to the shop and shifts on my own when allegations of that nature were attributed to me, and why I hadn't been put under investigation. Turns out, Janelle had in fact put in my employee file that I was under investigation, but had never actually gone through with any of the official procedures for monitoring and investigating me. Shock horror. Thus, she had fired me for the accused crime without looking into it at all, falsely claiming otherwise. Thus, the area manager took the dates and amounts of the cash discrepancies, confirmed that they had been reported on those days, without my knowledge, in Shay's own logbook of the shop's cash, and sent that information on to our security team to investigate. Another little detail, as the CCTV for every shop in the brand is outsourced to a private security company who monitors each shop remotely and has access to all the cameras and video. As was procedure, they looked into the dates mentioned to see if I had been doing anything untoward. I know I wasn't, and nothing was ever said to me, but they did find something. Turns out, money was going missing from the shop, but surprise, surprise, it wasn't me, but Jorge and Shay. They not only set me up for reasons I will never know, but were also falsifying numbers and cash checks on the system to hide it. One thing Shay was caught doing was deliberately shortchanging customers by taking portions of their winnings without them ever knowing it. Bear in mind, a lot of our customers were elderly men and women. Gordon claims that he once opened the shop after I and Shay had closed the night before and noticed a cash difference, but had been told not to say anything to me as I was under investigation and it could compromise it. He did apologize and I let it go. Needless to say, Jorge and Shay were fired. But it doesn't end there. Our team was small. Including me, there was a total of 4 people working at the store. As they hadn't been able to hire anyone to replace me, Jorge and Shay's termination meant that Gordon was the only employee at the busiest shop in our area. Even if they had been able to get other colleagues from the other 2 shops to help out, it wouldn't have been enough to keep the shop open and manage the amounts of customers. So they closed the location down until they could get the staff to run it. It was at that point that Gordon handed in his resignation and applied for his job at my work, meaning they had no one. On top of that, Gordon's girlfriend worked in the same shop as Janelle, and she relayed that she was rarely at their store in the other town for the next few weeks before the area manager reported she was fired as well. No reason given to her. I was later issued an apology for everything by the area manager and informed she, Janelle, was no longer with the company in an email sometime later. But somehow, it doesn't end there. With the store I worked at closed, this one being on the high street, where most people preferred to go, the only other location in town was the much smaller location in the suburbs, the one where Kara worked alone. She suddenly received an influx of customers into her tiny store space and absolutely no support from other staff or upper management. Thus, having already been overworked and underpaid, Running an entire store by herself, she quit, meaning that location had to be closed down too. All of this at the worst possible time, March, when the Cheltenham Festival was occurring, which is a huge moneymaker for the gambling industry, even in a small town like ours. An opportunity the 3 other bookies on the high street reaped the benefits of instead of my old place, as the former customers went to them instead. As it currently stands, just over a year later, both shops remain closed, and I'm currently entering a job in cybersecurity, the training for which I paid for with my current job. Thanks for firing me, dumbasses. You did me a favor. The last story is titled, Office Neighbor Doesn't Respect Closed Door. Suffers Consequences. I work with a guy who shows no respect for a closed door. Doesn't matter if I'm in a meeting with a client or a colleague, having a personal conversation on the phone, or just trying to focus on getting something done. Every time he wants to talk to me, he will just fling the door open and start yabbering. I'm sure that he knows he's a little fucker and probably gets off on it. There are numerous other issues with this guy, but the door is what really gets to me. I could have dealt with this a few ways, like politely asking him to stop, putting a sign on my door, or even locking myself in my office. But he isn't deserving of most of them, so rather than stopping him from coming into my office unannounced, I decided it would be much more fun to stop him from going into his own office. All the doors in my building lock from the inside with a simple push button, but only the cleaner and the office manager have a key. So one day I figured it would be fun to quietly lock his door when he was out, so that the next time he arrived he would be inconvenienced for 5 minutes or so until he got a hold of a key. The first time I did this, it was satisfying but definitely needed more work. So over the next few months, I would pick random times to lock the door. Sometimes before he arrived in the morning, sometimes during the day when he stepped out for a break. It was enough to be annoying, but not so much as to arouse suspicion. He's still a pain in everyone's butt, but at least I know he doesn't get to rudely barge into every office he wants to enter. Thank you for watching. I would really appreciate it if you would like the video and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. We'll see you again.